Good afternoon and welcome back to another ironic introduction to another video. Today I want to spark a little mini debate over whether or not Cavalier is the new Uncollected. And if you think that it is, it's mostly on you to bring your arguments to the comment section and tell me why you think it is, because I only have a handful of reasons here, because I personally stand on the side that Cavalier is not the new Uncollected. There's definitely, reasons for it, but most of this will be a rant of me saying this is why I think it's not. But that said, before I start, the yes versus no argument, I wanted to give credit to Brian Grant, contest champion. Thank you for making this video here. Let me see if I can't get it with the, his lovely face, his lovely mug, and the title. Thank you, PG, for making this video, 100 Cavalier versus 100 Uncollected Daily Crystals. I'm using these numbers as part of my evidence. It just gives you a rough idea of the numbers, so it's not perfect. It is subject to RNG, but it's a really, really good jumping point, and I'm just going to use it kind of as a blanket because there's not a whole lot of data out there, and it would kind of be a pain in the A to gather all that data for this video. This is good enough. So if you want to argue me on the specific numbers, there is a range there, but it's just a rough reference point. And then second, I wanted to start with a statement saying that I think it would be a lot easier if Kabam had just grouped Uncollected with the lower title stages from there, and then bumped them up to the current Cavalier Glory Store, left Cavalier on its own section, and then decreased their Glory Store to the current levels that they have in their new post, and then changed Thronebreaker to what it is now, and that three-pronged method of title progression would have worked a lot better, and it would have felt a lot more satisfactory. We wouldn't have this issue of people saying Cavalier is the new Uncollected. It wouldn't be a debate at all. People would feel a lot better about Cavalier. Problem solved. But I think that maybe the intention from Kabam is to really push Thronebreaker. They really want to segment that. From their perspective, they see the game as before Uncollected, Uncollected and Cavalier players, and Thronebreaker. Maybe that's their intention, but I think it could have been easily resolved just by tiering the Glory Store a little bit differently. But this does mean that Uncollected players do have a better benefit, but that might, I would need to see the population distribution to really understand. That's just part of something I can't assess. So that said, sorry, long-winded qualifier there, is I want to dive into the reasons I think, yes, Thronebreaker, Cavalier is the new Uncollected. So the first one is that before Thronebreaker, the highest progression title was Cavalier, one title higher than Uncollected. After Thronebreaker, the highest title progression level was one higher than Cavalier. So from that standpoint, Cavalier is now the second highest title progression, which is the same stance that Uncollected was before Thronebreaker. So just from like a raw comparison there, that's totally a thing. You can no longer say, oh, I have the highest title. Next is Glory Store is the same for Uncollected and Cavalier players, which means you have access to the same cost of resources. That is a really big deal and is what kind of started this whole, debate or sensation in the first place that I felt like I needed to rant about it. Next is Uncollected was not considered endgame when Cavalier existed as a title. Although I will make a caveat here that Cavalier, while no longer being considered endgame, for endgame players, it was already not considered endgame. Like, just being like, oh, I'm Cavalier does not mean you're endgame. Never did, but not never did, at one point it did, but before Thronebreaker, right before Thronebreaker launched, Cavalier did not mean you were an endgame player. It just meant that you did 6.1, and people were like, okay, there's all the way up to 6.4, bro. So yeah, I'm just saying, if we're making that argument, then it's been a long time that Cavalier has been the new Uncollected. But if you're on that side, that is still a valid argument. And then finally, no access to Tier 5 class Catalyst. Both Uncollected and Cavalier don't have access to Tier 5 class Catalyst in the Glory Store. And I should put the little quote here, and I'll add it here, in the Glory Store. And the reason for that is epic modifiers. Now, Uncollected players can run map 7 and 6 with epic modifiers. The thing there is good luck finding an alliance that is Uncollected or will take an Uncollected player with their Uncollected roster and prestige levels and will run epic modifiers with you. Good luck finding someone who's skilled enough as an Uncollected player to clear map 7 5 days a week. And you might be able to, and that might exist, and hopefully maybe me talking about it right now and saying, hey, you do kind of have access to this just by running the map, maybe that will spring up. Maybe some hardcore Uncollected alliances will push and run map 7 now. Maybe. I don't think that's very likely, because the truth is that there are Cavalier players running epic modifiers and getting tier 5 CC. So if the question is you don't have access to tier 5 CC, it's not accurate. Cavalier players have access to tier 5 CC in the form of the monthly quest and in the form of the Alliance Quest weekly runs, just by running epic modifiers. So as far as, yes, that's really all I could come with. And again, I apologize. I know this is really biased because I'm standing on the no side of the argument, which I'll go into in a moment. But if you have other reasons for yes, if you want to really try and convince me, bring your arguments. Drop them in the comments. Come at me. But remember that I'm logic focused. So you can't just come with me and say, oh, I feel like Uncollected is the new Cavalier, because that doesn't make it the new Cavalier. It is an important aspect, and that's why I'm making this video, because a lot of people feel like Uncollected is the new Cavalier. I'm just trying to come at it from a raw figure standpoint, a raw debate standpoint. So hit me with that logic game. Let me see what you got. I would love to, hear other people's opinions from it, especially coming from Cavalier players. I'm no longer at that progression level, so it's a little more challenging for me to flip the perspective switch. That said, these are the reasons why I think it is not. The first one is, while you can push Uncollected with only 4 stars, you cannot push Cavalier without a 5-star roster. So the difference between Uncollected and a Cavalier player at base is a minimum 5-star roster. This tells other players where your 5-star roster progression level is at a minimum. The expectation is that you have a handful of rank 3 5 stars capable of taking down the Act 6.1 mini bosses and bosses. Sorry, not mini bosses, bosses. And if you're doing that with rank 3 5 stars, it says a lot about either your dedication, your unit grind, your wallet, or your skill. Probably a mixture of all 4, and or an exclusion of just the wallet part, depending on how free to play you are. But that is a big difference between Uncollected and Cavalier players. Second is the 100 Cavalier crystals versus 100 Uncollected daily crystals, and the rewards difference I'll go over here when I go over reward differences in general. Next is the monthly calendar, which is minutely different. I'll go over in a moment when I go over rewards down here. And then finally is the weekly calendar, when we're just talking about base, you get this rewards. And I put negligible here because it's really a pathetic difference. So I'm not trying to use that as a full evidence, but I would be wrong to not include it because it is technically different. Well, it is different. It's just barely any difference. And then next is the access to the Cavalier monthly event. Now, I know people might say, oh, well, a fresh Cavalier player can't really push it. I'm just going to make an argument that that's not true. We've seen twice now, 2 out of 3 months, a 4-star only monthly event. And multiple players, including myself, have done that 4-star run live. We have shown that you can do it. You can do it relatively cheaply. I don't do it itemless, but I'm sure there are people out there who can and have. And that is huge. That is a really big deal. And that also means not just for like a completion, that means it's theoretically possible to use 4 stars, maybe boost and items, to explore the Cavalier monthly event. And maybe if I was doing this full-time, as a full-time job, I would do it just to prove a point. I'm not, so I apologize. Maybe start a crowdfunder. I'll do it for like, $100,000 because it's going to take me like 100 hours to do that. But my point still stands that it's theoretically possible because the Cavalier monthly event is not gated by 5 stars and 4 stars, which means that while static content is, Cavalier players, fresh minted Cavalier players, can dig into a 4-star roster, which they will have a larger 4-star roster to dig into to grab these Cavalier monthly rewards, which means a lot of potential rewards there if you're willing to dedicate the time and you have the skills to match. Finally, epic mods, which I already touched on. And then here I have 2 broad statements which I've separated because they're not concrete evidence. They're just broad statements that I think are relatively accurate. So, I want to qualify that because this is not hard evidence. I would call this soft evidence at best. And that is that pushing as hard as they can in Alliance Quest a Cavalier player will on average receive a higher rank reward, i.e. resources, etc., more glory or more map crystals, etc., which means that while your glory store is the same, you're getting more out of the glory store. So a Cavalier player does see more in that regard. And then second is pushing as hard as they can through the Uncollected monthly event. On average, a Cavalier player will clear the content easier. It means less items used, more items for other static content. You might see, maybe even start dipping into the Cavalier monthly event, depending on where you're at, to grab extra rewards overall in the monthly basis. So that is just like the raw things. I want to go over the rewards bit because I know this part is relevant. So again, I used Brian Grant's 100 versus 100 to do this top section here. And this is just the number difference in units, tier 4 basic, tier 2 alpha, tier 4 class catalysts, 4-star crystals, 5-star crystals, and 6-star crystals. And you can see between these two lines, it's actually like a really big difference over the course of 100 days. Which for this purpose of this video, I'm counting as 3 months just because I need something to base it off of. But in this case, it's a half of a tier 4 basic, negligible amount of units. 20 units is not a big difference. But 0.5, half a tier 2 alpha difference. Over 1 tier 4 class catalyst, 4 stars in general, the fact that he got any Cavalier. It is possible to get them as uncollected, I believe, but it is very, very rare. I think I only ever got 1. Maybe 2, but I'm pretty sure only ever 1. 5-star shards in general and 6-star shards in general. Now, the reason I need to count this as 3 months is when adding the monthly calendar, we can see that a lot of these are very similar. So for the monthly calendar, the units are the same, tier 4 basic is the same, tier 2 alpha, I believe is 0.5 to 1. I don't know why I have that right there, but it's 0.5 to 1. The tier 4 class is the same. 4 stars is 1 asterisk because it is a different login crystal, I believe, but I don't remember and I couldn't find like a concrete thing. But I believe it is a different login crystal, but it's essentially a 4-star, or maybe it's a 3-star for uncollected, but it's relatively unrelated. For 5-star shards, uncollected does get 5-star shards at the very end of the month, and Cavalier does get 6-star shards at the very end of the month. Now, adding this as 3 months, I wanted to compare the differences between just like the free raw value you get on the monthly basis, or sorry, on the 3-month basis, in order to get like an actual percent increase. So averaging to 3 months, I know that 100 crystals is not 3 months, but just averaging to 3 months, adding up to 3 months, my brain is not firing on full, but adding up to 3 months and then adding up these values for Uncollected and Cavalier and then getting just like a percent increase, there is a 6% increase in units over the course of 3 months, barely anything. There is a 10% difference in tier 4 basic, barely anything. There is a 33% increase in tier 2 alpha. That's actually pretty sizable. There is a 30% increase in tier 4 class, pretty sizable. There's a 100% increase in 4 stars. This is vastly affected by RNG, but is still a very significant number percentage-wise. There's no difference in 5-star shards, again, RNG, and then there's just an exponential difference in 6-star shards, infinite difference because you can't divide by 0, because Uncollected doesn't have access to that, but this is a pretty marginal amount of 6-star shards at 800 6-star shards over the course of 100 days. So yeah, it's nice, but maybe not something I would count as a raw difference. So yeah, those are my reasons. Those are the rewards differences. If you're just interested to own purely the rewards, do keep in mind this doesn't include what you're getting from the monthly event and what you're getting from the Cavalier monthly event, etc., because there are differences there. This doesn't include the potential for differences in gifts from Kabam. It doesn't include the potential for difference in progression tiers for deals, because until Cyber Weekend drops, I don't know how they're going to tier it off. Maybe they'll lump Uncollected and Cavalier. That will make a big difference. And then a handful of other things that I probably didn't think of. That said, I hope you enjoyed. Hopefully, maybe I could change some minds, because I've seen tons of people on the forum saying that Cavalier is the new Uncollected. So yeah, I was just hoping that maybe I could flip that perspective and maybe encourage people to see Cavalier as, still Cavalier. That said, as always, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you all later. Peace.